Weak dollar means weakened purchasing power. Every foodstuff, almost every foodstuff, either has a North American or a global price. And when you have a weak Canadian dollar, the ability of Canadian consumers to buy those goods is also weakened. A weak dollar means higher prices for Canadians. It is amazing, this Liberal Prime Minister, who's been wrong on every single economic issue of the last decade, has now delivered us a weak monetary base in this country by printing cash and continuing to block resources. He's given us a weak dollar, which is incredible because that was supposed to be his incredible forte. But if you look back, he's been wrong on every single economic issue of the last decade. Wrong on the carbon tax, wrong to oppose oil and gas, wrong to oppose the pipeline to the Pacific, wrong to support money printing during inflation. And he's wrong again today by continuing to impose taxes on our gas. So we have a motion with a very simple and obvious solution. Let's take all taxes off all gas for all of the year to save you 25 cents a liter, 20 bucks a fill up, $1,200 by Christmas. Let's lower the cost of the pump to re-energize our economy, move the parts that make up our economy more quickly, create jobs, relieve families, and unleash the power of our economy to...
All right, buckle up, because today we're diving into the great Canadian mystery that's kept economists, road trippers, and every dad filling up his minivan wide awake at night. Why on earth are gas prices in Canada higher than south of the border, eh? Grab your double-double, put on your toque, because we are about to watch a good old-fashioned Canadian political smackdown, and let me tell you, it is glorious, it is dramatic, and it has more twists than a Tim Hortons drive-thru line at 8 a.m. Now let's watch.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the chance to speak today. Let me just recap the global situation. Wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine. An oil price around $100 a barrel. And the price at the pump? $1.38. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about 2014. Prime Minister Stephen Harper was in power and wars were raging in the Middle East, both Syria and Iraq. The Russians had just invaded Crimea, and the global oil price was $100 a barrel, $10 higher than it is today. And yet, at the pump, the price was 40 cents a liter cheaper than it is today. What explains the difference? Well, let's go further. The United States, south of the border right now, Americans are paying in Canadian dollars and in liters 17 cents a liter lower than Canadians. They have the same global oil price, they have the same global factors like the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, and yet it's 17 cents a liter cheaper south of the border. Why? Well, sure, there are global effects that have influenced prices lately, but the bigger and the longer term cost are the Liberal government effects. One, they continue to impose a newly renamed and rebranded carbon tax, this time 7 cents a liter, rising to 17, but a broader tax that, unlike the earlier one, does not exempt farmers, fishers, or other food production. Two, the GST rises on the cost of a liter of gas as that cost goes up because it is a percentage-based tax. Three, we have an extremely weak dollar, and this is very unusual. Normally when the world has high oil prices, Canada has a strong dollar because we had so much oil to sell onto the world market. But because the share of our economy made up of our oil exports is down, the link between oil prices and Canadian dollars is reduced, which removes the protection that consumers had from global shocks 10 years ago. Now, with a weak dollar, everything priced in USD, or globally priced commodities like oil and gas, become far more expensive in Canadian dollars.
So, picture this. The House of Commons, wooden desks, suits, a room full of people who, deep down, all just want to go home and watch the hockey game. And into this scene struts a fellow so fired up about gas prices, you'd think somebody personally siphoned his tank dry. He clears his throat, adjusts his tie, and begins what can only be described as an Olympic-level roast, delivered entirely in the most polite, sorry but actually Canadian tone imaginable. He starts with a history lesson, because nothing says, "I'm about to destroy you," quite like a guy pulling out receipts from 2014. Back then, he says, wars were raging, oil was pricier than your uncle's opinions at Thanksgiving, and yet somehow, gas was cheaper. He says it like he's revealing the location of buried treasure. Explain that, he says, staring dramatically into the middle distance, as if the answer is written on the ceiling tiles. Then he really gets going. He starts comparing Canada to our neighbors to the south, pointing out that folks down there are paying less, liter for liter, even though, quote, they have the same global oil price, the same wars, the same everything. And you can just picture Mark Carney sitting there, sipping his water, trying so hard to maintain that calm, composed central banker face, the one he probably practiced in the mirror for years, the one that says, I have read many economics textbooks, and none of them prepared me for this specific Tuesday. Our hero presses on. He whips out the carbon tax, waving it around like it's a smoking gun at a crime scene. 7 cents a liter, he announces, rising to 17. The crowd gasps, or at least, in our imaginary parody version, they absolutely gasp, complete with dramatic orchestral stab, because that's how we're doing this today. Then he brings up the GST, tacked onto gas like a cherry on top of a very expensive, very Canadian sundae. Tax on tax, my friends. It's taxes all the way down. But the real showstopper, the moment where you can practically hear the mic drop echo off the parliamentary chandeliers, is when he starts talking about the weak Canadian dollar. And this is where, in our silly little parody universe, poor Mark Carney visibly shrinks in his seat. Because remember, this is a guy whose entire resume is basically, I am extremely good at money. Governor of the Bank of Canada. Governor of the Bank of England. The man practically wears a cape shaped like a loonie. And now here he is, being told, in front of everybody, that the dollar is weak, purchasing power is down, and groceries and gas are both feeling the pinch because of it. You can almost hear the imaginary crowd going, ooh, like they're watching a slam dunk contest, except instead of a basketball, it's fiscal policy, and instead of a hoop, it's Mark Carney's professional pride. And listen, in our parody universe, Carney doesn't even get to respond properly. He just kind of blinks, adjusts his glasses, and mutters something about long-term monetary stability while the rest of the room is still processing the fact that they just got a full economics lecture disguised as a political roast. It's like watching someone bring a calculator to a snowball fight and somehow still lose. Now, our fired-up speaker isn't done. Oh no, he rattles off this list, like he's reading out a Canadian version of a diss track. Wrong on the carbon tax, wrong on oil and gas, wrong on the pipeline, wrong on printing money. It's rhythmic. It's almost got a beat to it. You could put it over a drum track and release it as a single. Wrong, 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 and wrong again, he says. And somewhere in the room, a background extra in our parody version just quietly starts a slow clap. And then, the grand finale, the mic drop, the moment he's clearly been building to the entire time. Take all the taxes off all the gas for the whole year. $20 off a fill-up, $1,200 by Christmas. He says it with the confidence of a guy who just solved world peace, points finger guns at the camera. Okay, there's no camera, but in our imaginary retelling there absolutely should be, and sits down to what I can only assume was thunderous, maple-scented applause. Mean who? Somewhere off to the side, Mark Carney is left holding his little central banker briefcase, looking like a man who just got roasted by his own economics homework. It's peak Canadian political theater, folks. Polite insults, passive-aggressive charts, a guy quoting oil prices like they're batting averages. Where else in the world do you get political drama this dramatic, yet somehow still ending with everyone saying sorry at least 4 times? So that, my friends, is the great gas price showdown. Canadian style, exaggerated, dramatized, and turned up to 11 purely for your entertainment. Now remember, this whole thing is parody. Poking fun at the theater of politics, not a factual breakdown of anyone's real positions or character. If you want the real economic explanation behind Canadian gas prices, stick around, because next we're breaking down what's actually driving the numbers at the pump. But if you just wanted a laugh at how dramatic question period can get, well, you're welcome, eh?